Yes, we are rolling. What is up, America and planet Earth and everything in between? Welcome back to the Chance Raspberry podcast. I'm Chance Raspberry, and once again, bringing you mastermind cartoonist, Mr. Bill Kopp.
And I just have to say once again that with a name like Chance Raspberry, you're doomed to be a cartoonist.
Thank you and amen, dude. And maybe that's why that's all I've ever wanted to be.
That could very well be.
Cool, man. So, well, it's great to be back. Thanks again, Bill, for doing this.
My pleasure, man.
And when we last left off, we had just gotten into the nuts and bolts of Eek the Cat.
So we just sold Eek the Cat.
Yes.
And I think I got chewed out by Warner Brothers.
Right, because they were hoping you'd stay and do a bunch more scripts for Tasmania.
Right, and I thought, and that's how green and stupid I was. It's like, hey, I sold the show. And I thought they'd be like all happy, and they were just like, "You're leaving? What?" And Gene McCurdy really chewed me out.
Oh man.
But I think she also was sort of trying to teach me something there. She's like, well, for future reference, you really shouldn't do that kind of thing.
I gotcha. Sure, yeah, okay. And it's hard to think about that stuff when you're so excited.
Well, of course, and we had because I was hooked back up with Savage, and we had no clue that we were actually going to sell the thing.
Yeah.
Really.
Okay.
Because like, well, I got this steady gig, and he's like, well, we had, oh my God, and I'm spacing out, but it was International Rocket Ship. We did a storyboard of like a minute of the animation of Eek. Cool. And that was our tool that we used to sell. But we did the storyboard, but then it shipped off to Canada and they animated it, and I really didn't think anything was going to happen. Okay. And I didn't really care. It was just like some crazy thing we were trying. Nice.
So it's a fun experiment.
Yeah.
And that's the best, man. When those things work out, you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
They bought it.
That's exactly, I think, what we said was like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah. Cool.
We want to buy this show, and that was my first. When I first met Margaret Lesh.
Okay.
Who had, at the time, they'd done Tiny Toons and Animaniacs, and
nice.
She was sort of instrumental in the rebirth of television animation.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, and thank goodness, because so many great shows came out of that era.
Yeah, and it was the only animation that I looked at, because there'd been crap, for so long, that when I saw that, I was like, well, that's pretty good. And that's what led me to, that it was okay to work on Tasmania, and it was okay to, because, it was a viable, artistically it was viable.
Yeah.
And it looked good.
Okay, cool, yes.
So it was like, okay, because I had never done television really before, so it was kind of like coming from the Roger Rabbit stuff and the little bit of TV, The Simpsons. But those were so short, it didn't seem like, it wasn't like television production. They were a minute and a half.
Yeah, yeah.
So it wasn't like, we were doing a show. It was just like making short cartoons, which is all we'd ever done.
Okay.
Up to that point.
Very cool.
So that was a big surprise.
Nice. Yeah, and how, this is just kind of specifics, but when you said it was kind of like right then and there, they said, we'll buy it, and did they just like mail the contracts over and everyone signed and that was it, or was it a big deal?
Well, no, it wasn't a big deal. It was very slapdash and kind of disorganized.
Okay.
And, but I do remember that, that once we sold it, I was making like $300 more a week.
Nice. Hey, that rocks, man.
Yeah.
Over $1,000 extra bucks.
But I didn't even have an agent.
Okay.
I didn't have anything. I was just like, huh, what?
Yeah. Nice. And
then when Gene McCurdy yelled at me for doing it, then I thought, okay, something's up.
Yeah.
And then once we got into it, but what scared me I was kind of freaked out by it, because all of a sudden, I saw the schedule. And it's like, well, yeah, you have to do I think they ordered 26. Maybe they only ordered ones. I think they only ordered 13 half hours.
Okay.
One season.
Yeah.
And so then I was over at Fox, and it was a whole different animal. And then they showed us the schedule, and it was like, well, yeah, you have to make this many minutes of animation, because that's all I thought about it in terms of minutes of animation at that time. It was like, wait a minute, each show's a half an hour, and we have to do 13. That's like making 6 movies, you know? I was like, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And that kind of like spooked me, because it was like not a minute anymore.
Right, exactly.
It was like a lot of minutes in a row.
And this was the very first experience with that.
The very first.
Okay.
Yeah. And we were super green. And even though Savage had done the 2 movies before, we were, it took us by surprise.
Yeah.
We weren't really prepared.
Okay.
You know? So then, you know, they were, like Margaret and them at Fox were just saying, like, oh, well, you guys are really funny. We'll just write them. Just write them and make them. And we'll get Nelvana in Toronto to handle the production. So all you guys have to do is, like, character designs and the scripts.
Okay.
So we didn't have to do storyboards or any of that. We just wrote them, and then we, you know, there were new characters in every show, so we do the designs and we shipped it up there.
Nice, okay.
And again, this is that whole thing about Savage, and like I said earlier, it was like, when he told me to animate the dialogue, it's like, well, I've never animated dialogue before. He says, well, you just do it, man. You know? And that same, like, you know, what do they call it? DIY philosophy applied to this show.
Okay.
And we really had no apparatus. You know, they just gave us an office at Fox. It wasn't like we were at Warner Brothers doing a show. Or it wasn't like that.
Okay.
It was like, here's your office.
Nice.
Start writing, you know. So we had no real production facility or anything like that. It was really just about, like, write and write fast.
So this almost sounds like you guys got to go back to square one, where it was just the 2 of you in a room having a blast with coming up with your crazy ideas and having fun with them. And only now you're under the pressure of, we got to do a whole series and okay.
Yeah, like I said, we were just dumb and dumb and green. And they're like, well, you have to write a half hour every 2 weeks. We're like, well, okay, because that's what you do when you have a show. So, but we would write so fast. That's Rich.
Ah, okay.
We would write so fast because really we didn't have anything else to do. So
okay.
We just sat down and it was a tag team effort. Like, one guy had to type while the other guy would pace, and we'd both come up with gags. And then when one guy got tired of typing, then we'd switch places. And then I'd type and Savage would pace. And it just went like that. And it was and the scripts just came. We never thought about it. And we weren't getting, like today you get a shitload of notes from everybody.
Okay.
And back then there was none of that.
Nice.
The only people that we got notes from was like broadcast standards and practices. Like, please don't give the postman a machine gun. Okay. Can you give him an axe instead? That's a real note.
Awesome. That's great, man.
So,
and just the backwards logic, though, is like when you really comes down to it, that's so much more violent than, you know, to the
that would happen all the time. Then we quickly learned, here's a secret.
Okay.
That we would, like when we had a gag that we knew was subversive, we would always put another obviously wrong, horrible, violent gag that would attract attention. So they'd go for that one, and we'd pretend to fight. Be like, well, really, you're going to make us change? And we're like, well, yeah, you got to change it, you know? We're like, well, okay. And then they'd forget about the other more subtle, and that was really the genius of Eek, was like, you know, laced in all of that stuff is like really subversive comedy.
Brilliant, yes.
So the obvious violence would go, and then we'd be able to do our satirical thing, you know, and carry on.
Man, I'd love a reel or just like a notebook full of all those ones that you guys made on purpose, just to see how awful the show
There was an article somebody I'm sure can look this up. It's probably online somewhere, but Entertainment Weekly did an article on our show and we had the notes from broadcast standards and practices and the gags that we were writing, and you could see like side by side like what went, what stayed, what had to go.
Awesome.
And it was pretty funny. It's somewhere out there.
I was gonna say it's got to be archived. Yeah, so
I'm sure. Of course it is.
We'll look that up. I'll try to find that.
And that was pretty funny. And so we made it through that first season pretty effortlessly, really, because we were just having a good time. Really, seriously. I mean, we were having a fucking good time.
Nice, okay.
And so the show went on the air, and that was a great event, because that was the first time, really, that I could claim something as kind of my own, even though it was still me and Savage, which was just as good.
Okay,
but
yeah.
It was, it wasn't like The Simpsons, or it wasn't Roger Rabbit, or, it was like, this was our creation.
Yes.
So I remember the day that it premiered, and it came on at like some obnoxious hour, like 9 o'clock. Now I get up at 7, but back then I never got up until like 2 in the afternoon.
Right, man, yes.
So we threw this party the day that it premiered, and it was all, it was a party at Savage's house, and it was the whole cast and everybody. And it was all like Saturday morning when you were a kid. Like, everybody had to wear pajamas.
Yes.
It was all cereal.
I love it.
Cereal and whiskey, probably. And we had this great premiere, and it was just an awesome party. And I figured that was going to be it,
Okay.
So we sat around for... we were on a break, I think, when it went on. We probably still had post-production to do. But we really never thought it was going to go any further.
Okay.
We never considered it. We thought this is, they're gonna catch on that we're, that we don't really know what we're doing, and it's gonna end pretty quickly.
Okay.
And then the numbers started tumbling in, and we didn't know how to read that stuff either. So we'd show up at Fox at our office there, and like people who ignored us, or just didn't want to know, were suddenly like really friendly.
Yeah.
And we were like, what's up with that?
Yeah, well, I thought that...
Except for Margaret. She always believed in us.
Nice.
She was always there. But yeah, like other VPs and people who just like thought we were just, truthfully, probably rightfully so, fucking idiots, All of a sudden they were like, hey, can I get that door for you? Or would you like some coffee? And
that's awesome.
we were like, what's going on? And then Margaret came in and she was like, these numbers are like through the roof.
Awesome.
So we had a hit, but we still didn't really know. We were so dumb,
And that's got to be great, man, to just sort of be oblivious to your
it's the best.
own success, and you're just kind of like, I'm just having a ball.
Yeah, and that's what we were doing. We would, and the only, like I said before, the only thing we couldn't draw was a sober breath back in those days, So it was pretty fun, and we were just having a party, and it was great. And then but all of a sudden, it was like, no, this is going to go on. And then I think that after that first season started airing, they picked up like 3 more seasons. It was like, so all of a sudden it was like, okay, well wait a minute, that's going to take like 3 years, which back then seemed like a lifetime. It was like, do I even want to do this? It kind of freaked me out a little bit.
Okay.
Because it was like, wait a minute, 3 years of it? Really? And I was like committed to this. But because I didn't have an agent and we were so dumb, the contracts were like, whatever, man. I think I asked for a raise. It was like, well, what do you want? I was like, I don't know, like $200. It was stupid. And so then it was like all of a sudden like this real thing. And like I said, everybody's treating us different, and we had, with no planning, we had a hit on our hands. And it
Very
was
cool, man. The first hit.
The first hit, well, yeah. And then The Simpsons started too, and that's when that started.
And then you're kind of like, whoa, this other thing I had worked on is like, what?
Yeah, but you could never call that.
Exactly, man. Well, that's, again, like, the obliviousness is so cool because you watch it unfold and just kind of go, who knew?
Well, now remember, too, like, Eek came right on the heels of the Roger Rabbit stuff, and so I was so really focused on just the physics of animation and how to draw it, and then of course story came in, and then it was writing, and so I was still really like tunnel vision.
Okay.
Never thought about like we have a hit show, or none of that came into play, and it was a little freaky because all of a sudden, they're like, don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And they knew we were knuckleheads, and but they kind of like, that was the other thing about like being raised by wolves. Like, we never had real bosses,
Okay.
And we were out of control back then. So and then they kind of like supported that. They're like, well, that's what they do. You know,
And that's how these shows are crazy awesome.
Half of the shows we wrote in a bar. You know.
Okay, nice.
So
it's cool that they embraced your process. You know, like because at least they saw that it was what was making these successful episodes.
Yeah, the damage came later. But yeah, no, it was like having like bad parents, you know.
Just let them do
just
whatever.
Let them do it. If that's what they do, just let them do that, you know.
Good analogy.
Yeah, and so then we tumbled into the second season and really started kind of noticing like, well, wait a minute, you know, we can use this and we can focus it more, and then I think the second season of Eek is the best one because it was sharper, it was more focused. We realized like we weren't just like fucking around.
Yeah.
You know, it was like now we can, and it became more of like this is a forum.
Yeah.
And we were honing kind of a comedy style here.
Cool. Okay.
And it was also the first time that we became aware that, well, not the first time, but like Savage and I were a real team. And Fox used to send us out on these junkets, you know, on these press things, and because they just thought we were hilarious. I mean, we do stuff like we'd go into these meetings with the what do they call them, the syndicate, you know, other channels,
like the conventions and
no, not well that too, but
the
affiliates. Thank you, Rich Shidlaw, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, I tell you.
So we'd go into these meetings with the affiliates, but we'd bring like a phony briefcase and we'd put dollar bills like hanging out of. Like you close it so that we'd be like money.
Full of money.
Yeah, and we'd hand it to Margaret. We'd embarrass Margaret. We'd like hand her it's like we handed her a box of money.
That's
and
great.
they loved it. They ate it up. And we were funny. I mean we made a joke out of the whole event, you know, but yeah, they were sending us out.
In true cartoonist fashion, and it's sort of like you guys were living your own motto. You were living your own style, if you will.
And there really were no rules, and then, you know, and that was also, again, like, at that time, you know, like I said, I made a joke about, like, oh, we'll have $200 more a week. And even Margaret was just like, you're an idiot.
Like, ask for way more?
Like, here's, like, for way more.
Yeah, okay.
And then it got even sillier because, you know, then we had money to play with, and that was pretty cool. Well,
silly is good.
Yeah.
All right.
So during that second season, I started drawing around in the sketchbook with like Pith, Possum, and I always wanted to do a genre cliffhanger thing, but these were all just notions.
While you're working on Eek.
Well, yeah, well, because that's what you do. You know, you're just screwing around while you're, you know, working on it. And
now, was this before you guys added Terrible Thunder Lizards?
Oh, wait, yeah.
Way before.
That didn't come until like the third or maybe even the fourth season. I can't really remember.
Sorry, guys, I'm real good at jumping the gun, so we're getting to that.
Well, the significant moment here is that one day I got a phone call from Disney Television, which at that time I didn't even know there was a Disney Television.
Okay.
It was like, huh?
Yeah, like I thought you guys just made movies.
And Gary Kreisel, who was apparently the head of Disney Television Animation, called me, left a message. He's like, I really like your show. Give me a call or whatever. He had seen Eek or whatever.
Cool.
Now, this is how weird it was back then because, you know, now... I mean, well, just today I was at Nickelodeon pitching 5 things.
Nice,
you know?
right, yes.
Back then, it's like, now Disney's calling me, so they set up a lunch at some restaurant on Ventura Boulevard, and I didn't know these guys, and I was still kind of weird about TV. I was still thinking, you know, feature animation.
Yeah.
You know, like real animation.
Hardcore quality.
Yeah, because I knew Eek was like... sub par on the animation technique level.
Okay.
But it didn't bother me because the writing was so strong.
Nice, yeah.
So I was kind of like, well, yeah, but it's TV animation. So I was like, we didn't even do, it was just me and Savage. And our office was at the 9000 building on Sunset, which is right across from the Rainbow.
Oh.
Okay, that's another story.
Perfect. We're going to get to that.
That's the R-rated the story.
Okay.
But anyway, so I go to this meeting, and Gary Kreisel and Bruce Cranston were there, and a couple other guys from Disney, and they're like, your show is hilarious. And I was like, well, it's not really mine. I mean, I do it with Savage. And they're like, well, we want you to come over and do a show for us.
Okay.
I was like, well, we just got picked up. You know, I'm working on this thing. And they're like, well, yeah, but, you know, this could be your, you know, totally,
just you.
Totally seduced.
Right. the devil's advocate was just like on your shoulder. Okay.
Well, but in my defense,
yes,
I'll say, all up until then, I'd always been hooked with somebody else all the way through, whether it was Disney or The Simpsons or Savage. I had always had some other person or entity there that I was sharing it with, and I was desperate to really break out.
Okay.
So when they made that offer,
it was like the offer you couldn't refuse.
I had to go.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So that was, well, I told Savage about that, and that was, I think that might have been the first time we had a real fight.
Okay.
And because he was pissed.
Okay.
Rightfully so.
Sure.
But I explained myself. It's like, look, man, I've been working for you. I've been working for them. I've been working for everybody. I gotta. He's like, dude, we just got. You can't do. You know. So It was a big.
Like he understood.
Yeah, but I'd always been sort of under his.
Yeah.
Thumb, and the guy's. I love him. I mean, he's the like I said, he's the closest thing to a mentor I ever had.
Sure.
But I thought he'd be a little more understanding, so I guess I was still dumb. Because that's the same thing I thought. That's the same thing I thought G. McCurdy was gonna say. It's like, aren't you happy for me? She's like, no, fuck you. You know.
Yeah, man, but like it's so he got it, and it was like it took him a while to warm up to the. I mean, he eventually was. It sounds like he eventually got.
Well, I think we knew right away, right off the bat, as soon as I told him what was going on, that he knew that he was going to have to write them all because we were in.
And that's the hard part, right? Yeah, I'm sure that had a lot to do with.
It had a lot to do with it, but I told him also. I said, look, you know, there's going to be a development phase, so I was still there. You know, working with him all the way through the second season for sure.
Cool.
Like, this didn't really happen until the second season was, you know, in hand.
Okay.
And then I think I was there for probably a quarter of the third season. But by that point, Shnookums Meat happened, and then I was over at Disney. And then all I did was the voice after that.
Okay, cool.
But that was, like... That felt great. It was like a new pair of shoes, you know?
Yeah, nice, man. So, let's talk about that then, man. Like, when Disney calls you over to do Shnookums Meat, did you already know what you wanted to do? It was like now you got to come up with a brand new original series.
They didn't know either.
Okay.
They were just like, you made this funny show. Come and make a funny show for us. I'm like, well, yeah, like what?
Okay.
Like, we do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Okay, I'm going to say that again because it sounds kind of important, but it's like, nowadays you go out and pitch your ass off and you got to run a gauntlet before your shit even gets on the air, or even an animatic now.
Yeah, yes.
So here's a giant studio saying like, come over here.
The studio.
And we don't know what we want, but just do something funny.
Nice.
And here's a box of cash, too. You know?
Then you actually got handed the briefcase full of cash.
Yeah, and by that time I had an agent.
Awesome.
So I was like, you know, okay.
Cool.
But they really didn't know. We didn't know. I think they might have had an idea. It's like, do a dog and a cat thing, or whatever.
Okay.
And, but I was still kind of, actually, to be perfectly honest, I was scared of directing cartoons because all the stuff that I'd done personally had been really slapdash. My first taste of a production line was on Eek. And when I saw what those directors had to do, it scared me because I didn't even know how to really, really, really fill out an exposure sheet or any of that. I mean, I just skipped that part.
Okay.
So I was nervous about that. So I called Jeff DeGrandis, who was working on Animaniacs.
Cool.
And we had dinner at the Hamburger Hamlet.
Hey, I remember that place.
Yeah. Yeah, and usually Dean Martin was there. But
Nice.
so I called Jeff and I said, look, I got this opportunity, but I'm like, I want to write it, and I'm scared to death of like directing this stuff myself. I really don't know. So would you come and direct?
Okay.
And that's how that happened.
Cool.
So, and then, of course, Jeffy became a fixture for the next 5 years. We were a team.
Cool. Okay.
But he was great because he knew all that detail stuff that, and nowadays nobody even knows what an exposure sheet is. But back then it was like hieroglyphics. I mean, it was like, there's like this lingo that goes, it's enormous.
Right. Timing is its own language. It's
yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, and weird levels and all that. I mean, I knew a bit of, I had used them at Cal Arts for shooting on the Oxbury, but, I was like, production line, and then also remember, with Eek, we didn't have to worry about that.
Cool.
All we had to do was write and do a funny drawing of a guy.
Nice, yeah. Okay.
So Jeffy and I hooked up there, and that's when Shnookums Meat started. But I always liked Rocky and Bullwinkle, and I loved the format of that half hour being broken into sections, because they had Rocky and Bullwinkle, and they had Fractured Fairy Tales and Dudley Do-Right, Aesop, and I just loved that idea of a busted up half hour, because
so much variety.
Yeah, and the ideas were coming fast and furious then, so it was like, what are we going to do?
Awesome, okay.
So we got down with the dog and the cat thing, Shnookums Meat. But I said, well, let's put a cliffhanger in the middle.
Cool.
And I hate superheroes. I wanted to make fun of superheroes. So that's where Pith came from.
Nice.
And originally, Tex Tinstar was going to be this thing called Guy and the Space Vigilante.
Nice title, man. Cool.
And it was going to be like a Flash Gordon, same cliffhanger, 3-minute, whatever Tex is, it was going to be that.
Cool.
So we were all ready to go, and I had Mike Fontenelle and Lynn Naylor and a lot of guys that had worked with John Kay on all this stuff.
Right, okay.
So we get this up and ready to kind of roll. And I get a phone call from John Kay, who I had never met.
Okay.
And it was like, what? I knew obviously I knew who he was.
Yeah.
And he kind of scared me a little bit, So I get this phone call, and he's like, hey, listen, man, I was talking to Mike Fontenelle, and I know that, you're doing the space thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be really funny. And he's like, well, listen, I have a space cartoon that I'm doing. And I don't want you to do a space cartoon.
Basically, like, please don't.
In a really nice way, but it was like talking to like the god. It was like the mafia.
Okay.
You got a space cartoon. Huh?
Yeah.
I don't think you should do that.
No, not space.
Because I've got a space cartoon.
Space isn't in.
But you know how loyal people are to John and Fontenelle and Lynn and all those guys. I mean, they were in his camp. So.
Yeah.
And it was really intimidating, but like really like nice. He was very nice.
Cool.
But it was like behind it there was a gun. And I was like, well, all right, well, I'll do it. I'll turn it into a western.
Cool.
And he's like, okay, cool.
Oh, so you told him in that conversation, like, maybe I'll do this instead.
Well, I always knew it was going to be, come on. Cliffhanger genres, what do you got? You got space, you got a western. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do Dick Tracy, so, there you go. But I also knew that had I fought him on that I would have lost Fontenelle and Lynn. Everybody who was in John Kay's camp would have bailed on me.
Okay, yeah.
So I knew that and he knew that too. And after that happened, we became really great friends, and we were fine.
Cool.
But it was pretty funny.
Nice.
And it really did freak me out. I was spooked, It was like, whoa.
Yeah, man. And that's cool. I mean, just to get that call, he came to you, like, out of the blue, and you're like, what? This was so unexpected.
And this is, Ren and Stimpy had already been an enormous sensation. So
okay.
It really was like, yeah. It was funny.
Cool, man.
And I've told him that story a couple times. I don't even think he remembers making the phone call, but I do.
Yeah, sure, man, right?
Yeah.
And that's such a good story, man. I love that one.
But it was an easy gear shift So everything was fine.
Cool. And look what great product came out of that, man. Because Tex Tinstar, like, I can't imagine it being anything else now.
And then here's another thing along those same lines. Like, I wanted to call him Tex Teflon.
Okay.
Sounds totally idiotic right now. But I couldn't use Teflon because it was trademarked. So the Disney Water's like, no, you can't use Teflon. So
now, where did that come from? That idea, was it? You just thought it sounded funny?
Well, he's bulletproof.
Okay.
It's Teflon.
Yeah.
That was
Okay.
it.
Okay. Right.
But come on. Tex Teflon?
Yeah.
What?
Like, now you listen to it. It's again, you can't imagine it being anything
else.
But
and
Tex
the same thing
Tinstar.
happened on Twisted Whiskers, and Rich is here to back me up on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
That originally Mr. Muser was called Winthrop.
Mr.
Winthrop.
Cool.
Fall of the House of Usher.
Yeah, we used to sit in this tiny little closet over at Mandalay Films, and he'd be writing and I'd be sketching on the other side, and just like you said, to break up the air, we would do Vincent Price impressions, like, "Oh dear boy, Mr. Winthrop, I have such sensitive ears," that kind of stuff.
Cool.
And really, one day we said, like, well, what if Vincent Price was a cat? What would that look like? So I did this drawing of him, and it actually looked a whole hell of a lot like Vincent Price. But I go, yeah.
But to the point was like, he was called Mr. Winthrop.
Mr. Winthrop.
And we fought for that name. We went head to head with everybody.
Yeah.
And we're like, no. And then they're like, no, you can't. I can't remember why they shot it down.
Well, legal shot it down
because
they said Winthrop is in that movie. So.
Was that what it was?
That's why. And then,
so he becomes Mr. Muser, which is like a way cooler, more perfect name. So
Yeah.
that shit happens all the time.
Nice. Okay.
So yeah, don't be afraid if there's a legal problem with your name, because you're gonna come up with a better one.
Yeah. That's almost like sort of the formula. It's like that leads to the one that everyone loves and remembers.
Right.
Very, very cool.
Right. So off we went on Shnookums Meat and Pith Possum, and actually Rich did the first Pith Possum.
I did one of them. Yeah.
The first one.
The first one.
That hit me so hard when I saw that, because like just every single gag seemed perfect. I was just kind of like, these guys are onto something really cool that no one else is doing. And it was for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone made this cartoon show just for me.
Oh, that's a great compliment.
Yeah, I mean, thank you guys for doing it, because it felt like just such a cool, like, oh man, they get my sense of humor, and like, this is what I've been waiting for.
Well, we were those guys. I mean, we were you. I mean, we were thinking that way, and we were all about funny cartoons and well-crafted, good animation. I mean, if you really look at the Shnookums Meat Show, and you look at the tech stuff, particularly the tech stuff and the Pith stuff, the animation is beyond belief.
Nice.
So the Shnookums Meat stuff, not so much, because that was done in
different studio,
China, I think.
Okay.
But we had a New Zealand studio
and
Australian. And those motherfuckers could draw, man.
Nice.
So the animation was really slippery and graceful and beautiful. And then you'd get Shnookums Meat. And it's funny because the dog and the cat were supposed to be the lead of the show, and they ended up being the weakest part.
And it was like the thing that opened the show, and it was the name of the show.
Well, and we made the first 2 or 3 before we had the whole show.
Okay.
So it was just this dog and cat, and we were getting this kind of shitty animation, and we were actually, I think we were going to be fired.
No kidding.
Because I think Jeff DeGrandis was the guy that fought for the other ideas for Tex and Pith. And say, look, we just got us at the wrong studio. Overseas. Mm-hmm. So give us a place that knows how to really swing, and we'll show you.
Okay.
And then at the same time, while that was going on, I had executives coming to me saying, like, well, who's your writing staff and all this stuff. And again, this is just left over from Eek. Like, I didn't know any better. It's like, well, heck, I'm going to write them all, And I did.
Yeah.
All 39 of them.
Seriously,
but
man.
I was like turning out a script a week.
Wow.
And it was fun because I didn't know any better.
Now, when you say... That's good, man. And it's true, but when you say you did a script a week. Was that all 3 segments in one script?
No,
okay.
It was like one
segment per week.
One cartoon would take me a week, and the text stuff was a joke because I'd always write them into a corner where everybody was going to get killed.
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't think about it until that week came up, and then I'd write them out of that corner and into the next corner.
Yeah, right. And that's interesting and really cool. And
that was super fun because writing the text stuff was really a break from writing a cohesive narrative.
Well, I was going to say, you bought
your... were narratives.
Yeah, man, you bought yourself more time because it was like, well, this doesn't have to have an ending.
No.
Never has to end.
Yeah, it never has to end.
That's great.
So that was pretty funny. And so I'd purposely write myself into an impossible corner and then just pull some crazy thing out.
Excellent.
But it was funny because, you don't see that anymore, I don't think,
Really? I mean, I don't know. Here's the thing. I don't even know of any variety shows, and it was like, that made me remember Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yeah. That was the idea.
And there were other ones like they did Underdog and they did like some other, but I felt like that format was really popular for a while and then it just disappeared until Shnookums Meat and I haven't seen it since. I mean, I really don't know.
Well, and that's because unless you're as dumb as I was, it's really hard to write.
Okay.
If you're stupid and funny, you can write it with ease.
Okay.
Because you're not thinking about it.
Right on.
But as soon as you start to think about it, then you're like, oh my god, this is overwhelming. I need more writers. And then it's all going to go to shit.
Okay.
But, I was still so green at the time. I mean, Christ, I was only like 27 or something.
Wow, okay. Very cool. And that's an interesting point because I often find myself thinking, like I work on The Simpsons and there's so many people involved in that production now. It's kind of like you're trying to please 57 people.
Well, that's a different kind of that's real sitcom writing.
Okay.
And like we said earlier, that first season was a disaster. And until they brought those guys in, did it even out.
Right.
Silverman was in command of making the animation swing.
Yeah.
The writers were totally different universe. And they did get it together.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Well, yeah.
It might just pan out.
Just maybe. Yeah, and the funny thing is,
the jury's still out.
Yeah, we're waiting for the verdict. But the funny thing is, all those guys, like Silverman and Matt and everyone that I've heard or talked to, say the same thing to this day. Like, oh my gosh, season 1 almost didn't air. It was unwatchable. It was unviewable, and it's so funny to hear.
But look at what else at that period in time had ever done that.
Yeah,
they were taking an enormous chance.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, the first season is going to be because there's nothing to compare it to in 1988.
Yeah, right, exactly. And see, the funny thing is, I find it to be one of the best seasons ever made now because it's so goofy and screwball and really
Well, I
cool.
like looking at the original shorts.
Yeah, those too.
They are really underground.
It's awesome.
Well, that's the difference between punk rock.
Yeah.
And progressive rock.
Exactly.
It's like,
yes.
The original Simpsons, the shorts, are the Ramones.
Yeah.
And then it's, you too.
Yeah, right.
It's like, there's a gulf in there.
Yeah.
Something happened in there. Where it, but, well, thank God it did, and those guys were awesome. And Silverman was pivotal in making that happen.
Awesome.
Because it never would have worked. They could have all the greatest writing in the world, but if the animation didn't work, it was going to fall apart. So David was right. He steered that, and he's still steering it.
Exactly, man. And it's really cool that you were able to keep the crew small, and you were able to write all of them pretty much yourself.
Yeah, I did write all of them.
Yeah, there you go, man. It was just you were a one-man army as the writer, and you...
Then they fired me.
Wait, whoa, okay. And, yeah, exactly. Scratch the needle across the record.
Well,
there.
we knew we were getting away with murder.
Okay.
Because, we were sitting there with Shnookums Meat, and what else was going on at the time? Timon and Pumbaa, The Little Mermaid, Gargoyles,
Yes.
The real cash cows for Disney were them other shows, and we were this goofy oddball. I knew it wasn't going to last.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Gary Kreisel was great, and he really let me do my thing, and Jeffy, and that was the formative experience. So when that blew up, Oh, I got in trouble there too.
Oh, what happened, man?
Well, I wrote a letter to the crew.
Okay.
And I said, like, it's somewhere. Somebody, it's still out. It's circulating out there, and I'm sure you can find this too. So I wrote this letter to the crew, and I was like, okay, well, listen, the blankety blank bone executrons. That was the first time Jeffy came up with the term executrons, which is, I'm proud to say, now in the popular vernacular. I hear it all over the place.
Nice, yes.
So Jeff DeGrandis coined the term executron.
Remember this, folks, because see, I'm going to start using that one. I love that word.
It's all over the place. I hear people at weird parties saying it. You know,
nice.
Like, oh yeah. So we knew they were going to kill the show.
Okay.
And because they had, mermaids and stuff to do.
Yeah.
And hunchbacks or whatever was going on.
Now, was this just a hunch you got, or had someone let you in?
Oh no, it was pretty obvious. I mean, I knew.
Okay.
We were doomed.
Okay.
So I wrote a letter to the crew, and it was not. I didn't say like fuck the executive. It wasn't like that. It was like, look, we got away with murder here.
Okay.
And we were able to do our thing, and you all did a great job. It was really a booster to the crew.
Nice, nice.
But it circulated.
Okay.
It leaked out. This is like classic Washington D.C. politics. Like, oh fuck.
Yeah. I did something, and then it got loose.
So I got called in. I had to go see, like, Eisner, and they were like, okay, this is insubordination.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they said, you can't do this kind of thing, and thanks for, making the show, but you can pack your shit now.
No kidding, man. So that's what sort of...
But I already knew the show was done. Had I not known that, I never would have written it. And it wasn't nasty. It is out there. Okay. I have a copy of it somewhere.
Okay.
And it's not... It was a letter to my crew saying, like, you guys, we fucking did it here. Of all the unlikely places, we made a super underground cartoon, and we were lucky to get this far.
That's true. That's awesome.
So that's really what it was saying. And then... but they kept me around for about 4 or 5 more months.
Okay.
And I pitched them all kinds of stuff, and they were never going to do it. I think I must have had some time left on my contract, so they were just like...
Oh, no. So even though they were like, you can get out, they didn't let you really leave because you had contract time. Okay.
Yeah, but they weren't going to do a thing with me. They were never going to give me another show.
Wow, okay.
So they were like... But I knew from my previous feature animation experience when I left Off the Roger Rabbit stuff... Remember?
Yeah, oh yeah, dude.
So I was like, well, okay.
You've been...
I wasn't going to yell at anybody, and I was going to at least grab a paycheck until the smoke cleared.
That's great, yeah, and it's cool. That's like you've been... This is not uncharted waters here. You'd been down this road before. It was familiar territory, and so that was cool.
Yeah, but it was like...
As cool as it could be, I should say.
It was cool as it could be, and then during that little period of being in the Twilight Zone at Disney, Margaret had gotten back in touch with me, and she was like, "Come back to Fox. I'll give you, we'll make some kind of a deal." So, but I had to wait.
Okay.
I couldn't say anything about it.
Okay.
So now we're getting into also the weird part about, like, now all of a sudden, like after Eek and after that, the business for me personally changed. All of a sudden, I couldn't be like just a solo crazy guy. It was like now it was like business. And there were other people concerned who were making money.
Okay.
So it was all of a sudden it became, I don't want to say it was a machine, but there were other concerns going on, and I was told finally for the first time ever to behave.
Okay.
And
you're almost kind of thinking, I mean, I would imagine that you sort of go, but my misbehavior is what you guys wanted. Like that's
they
what made
they don't want to hear that anymore.
Of course, yeah.
And they're like, okay, well now you're starting to get into, trouble.
Too much trouble.
Right. And just calm down and we'll take care of you, but we'll see you in 4 months and just like play it out and
like please don't do anything.
Please don't do anything crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and that was coming from Margaret.
Okay, yeah.
And she was and she to her word, as soon as that contract was up, immediately I had the biggest deal of my life so far, a 5-year deal at Fox.
Wow, nice.
5 years without even knowing what I was going to do.
Okay. Was it the same kind of situation where they were like, we want you to do something new, we don't care what it is?
We don't care what it is, just come over here, and Margaret was still rolling with Fox Kids. I mean, you gotta remember what a giant machine that was. I mean, come on, Power Rangers, Tiny Toons, Animania, I mean, it was like $1 billion thing.
Yeah, totally. And I watched all of those shows every day. And it's,
everybody did,
right
around the globe,
along with so it was.
And that was the other thing too, because at this point now, Eek was already on for 3 years, and it had gone global too. So that was, circulating around. So it was. I did have to kind of pay attention a little bit.
Okay.
And play nice.
So how cool, man! Like while you had been gone, though, this thing had gone viral, and before that was even a thing, and it was just like, okay, now everyone knows this. It's popular everywhere.
Yeah,
that's great.
And never really thinking about it like, oh, I'm popular. Never like that.
Well, sure,
it was just like
unbeknownst.
Other people would tell me.
Yeah.
How popular it was, and I'd be like, oh God, well, I guess I better pay attention, And that was, and Margaret was a big part of that.
Okay.
She's like, look, I know you're crazy, but. I'll take care of you if you play ball.
Cool. Okay.
So then it was back over to Fox, and but I took Jeffy with me.
Okay.
He stayed behind for a little bit because he was directing Timon and Pumbaa.
Okay.
Jeffy was really good at that. He was really good at acting crazy and then being like really like a company guy. So way better than I was.
Okay.
Yeah, I could never play that way.
Okay.
So he did that while I was getting things set up at Fox, but then I just sucked him into my evil world again.
Cool.
And then the next thing we did, I had already conceived Mad Jack, and I had it up ready to go.
Okay.
And then I got a phone call from Margaret, and she said, we're going to do your Mad... And I love Mad Jack. It was still to this day, I think it's my favorite thing I've ever done on TV.
Cool, okay.
But she said, before we do that, you have to go to DreamWorks and do Tinnsylvania.
Oh, okay.
We want that show, but it's in trouble.
All right.
And it was a mess.
Okay. So it hadn't come out yet. They were still working on it.
No, they were still developing it. Oh my God, the artwork was amazing. And that show... Shnookums Meat was 3 parts. Tinnsylvania was like 4, wasn't it? I don't even remember, really.
I think, it was pretty epic.
It was huge.
Yeah.
It was a mammoth undertaking.
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
Yeah.
I remember the first time getting real headaches, like suddenly feeling like, on that show was the first time I was just like, this is like a job. I mean, I had to look like a performing monkey,
Okay.
Before, everything up to then had been like super fun.
Okay.
And really lighthearted.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden this, And I had just also gotten a taste of making my own stuff, and now I was saddled with a show that was conceived elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I still had to make it go.
And they wanted you to sort of take over and do your own thing with it.
They absolutely wanted
nice.
me. She had a great deal with Steven, and they wanted it to happen, and we were the guy, and Jeffy, with me and Jeffy. It wasn't just me. It was like they wanted us together on it.
Cool.
So that was kind of cool.
Right on, man.
Because I had somebody else with me,
Yeah.
So I wasn't just like twisting out in the wind.
Not alone. Yeah, you had a partner.
And that was very important. And I think on that show, Jeffy and I got... I mean, Jeffy and I were roommates at Cal Arts.
Cool.
But we got really tight on that because it was survival.
Yeah. Wow.
So we were really like, shit,
we got to make this go.
Yeah, and they were coming at us big time.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like, are there any specifics that were...
Well, I always found it amazing that Steven Spielberg was off shooting Saving Private Ryan, recreating the storming of the beaches of Normandy, and still had time to give us notes on our story on the shitty cartoon that we were making. It's like, what the fuck? And we would.
Yeah.
We would get memos, like, from Ireland.
Wow, okay.
And he's like, well, listen, when the gun's empty, you should throw the gun at the guy. Or whatever it was. It was like weird. It's like seriously? But it was really him writing it.
Yeah, that's That's cool, man. Well,
but we wanted more involvement. This is really funny because I had lunch with DeGrandis today.
Okay.
And we were reminiscing about this, and we wanted Steven's involvement, and then, he had those damn movies to make, so we couldn't get him. So we made, those Magic 8 balls?
Oh, yeah.
So we put his picture on that, and it was called the Magic Spiel Ball.
Ah,
and
cool.
And like, well, what does Steven think? And then we'd shake it up and turn it, and we really were like, it was like, I don't know, ask again, or whatever it said. And we got in trouble for having that too.
Really? What?
But this all culminates in the when he got back from doing, I think it was Amistad. That's how long this went on.
Okay.
We went over to DreamWorks and we were meeting with him, and he had he was not happy with what we had done.
Oh.
And he's like, okay, I know you're under the gun, and we had an air date, and you were in fucking Ireland, so what? Right. Now you're gonna give us notes when we have an air date like in 10 days.
Okay.
So he's like, well, here's what he said. He goes, and he was very nice. He's the fucking nicest guy, and super, obviously brilliant.
Cool.
But he was like, all right, well, tell me what I can change, and you guys can still make your air date.
Okay.
So we were like, okay, so we kind of sat with him for, I think it was like a week where we worked with him and tried to hone stuff.
How cool.
And then, it was pretty cool until the end of the week.
Oh, okay.
And we were in this conference room, and I'll never forget this because it got interrupted by Barbara Boxer calling him.
Okay.
Right? It was like, oh, Barbara Boxer's on the phone. We have to wait. And then he did this, we'd gone through whatever we were going through, and he had made whatever notes he could to try to save this thing. I think I've blocked Pennsylvania out of mine because I really don't remember the
It's all coming back.
And then he goes, and he looks at me and Jeffy, and he goes, you know what? I should have spent more time with you two. And he used two fingers, and he pointed at me and Jeffy, and I knew right then that basically we were done.
Okay. Man, and so he was not happy, and that was it.
He was not happy, but he knew also that we had done our best, and it was kind of his fault too, because he wasn't available to us.
And he realized that.
He did realize, and it was very nicely done, but it was that.
The fingers.
And it was just like one finger for both of us.
Daggers in the heart, yeah. You're just like, what?
I should have spent more time with you two.
Oh, man.
And it was like...
Yeah, in front of everyone.
And then, we got off on some weird movie joke, and he was always... And I'd worked with him a lot before, so I kind of, we had done work together.
Yeah.
But that, I knew we were finished.
Okay.
Yeah. But that was always the deal, too. I told Margaret, because I had Matt Jack all ready to go.
Okay.
She's like, no, you got to do this. I said, well, I'm only doing one season.
Okay.
And then you guys can take it from there.
So you were always sort of slated to come
always for one season.
Retool things.
So even though I got the two finger
death look.
Pointy from the Kung Fu Spielberg death punch.
Yes.
It was already in the deal, and it was only one season, so
Okay.
I didn't feel so bad.
Cool.
And I didn't even really think about it until I had lunch today with Jeff, and he's like, and he brought that up, and he goes, "You remember that?" And I was like, "I do remember that." He's like, "No, we were done. We were El Dunno."
Yeah.
I think it was exactly right. El Dunno.
Exactly, man. Wow.
And that was it. I think it's the last
okay.
time I ever saw him.
Okay. Well, and so it let you loose, though, to go work on Mad Jack.
Which
then.
was the fucking dream at that point.
Okay.
Like, that show was, where else are you going to have a totally self-serving son of a bitch lead character who actually, and I voiced him, so I mean, that was me.
Yeah,
it's like,
sure.
And
that's the best,
and
man.
it was awesome.
Cool.
And those shows were so acerbic and brilliant, and just they were so satirical and biting, and I couldn't believe that it was on Saturday morning.
Yeah, and what's so cool is, like, I love that just that era, it feels like there was those trace elements of experimenting going on, where where it's like all of us, you've got this sort of standard Saturday morning formula, and then boom, here comes this thing out of left field, and
totally
you're like,
subversive.
What? Yeah, very
it
cool.
was great. And then right when we finished the first season of that was when Margaret left and Chaim Saban came in.
Okay, Saban.
And he hated me.
Oh no!
Because Margaret had made such a sweet deal for me. I remember talking to Chaim, and he called me into his office one day. We were like midway through the first season. He's like, "I can't believe this deal." He's like, "We're paying you way too much money."
He was angry that you were getting overpaid.
Yeah.
In his eyes.
But he wasn't really angry. He was just like,
"You lucky son of a."
He's like, yeah. It was like, that's amazing. He just had it in for me.
Okay.
And it's weird because we got along pretty good.
Kind of like a love-hate relationship, sort of.
And he had another agenda, too, which was shown to us later, because what he actually did was, he took over the Fox Kids network.
Okay.
And then he made that deal with ABC Family, and then everything went. And then when Disney bought it, Disney owns Eek, Mad Jack, Schnookums Meat. There's 3 shows right there.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember, and we were waiting. Jeffy and I were in the Philippines, waiting, finishing up the first season.
Okay.
And waiting for the word go on the second season. And I had like 3 scripts written, and it was just getting better and better and better. I had visions of this thing turning into a movie franchise. That's how hot it was.
Awesome.
And they called us in the Philippines, and they're like, "Come home.
Okay.
You're done. Chaim killed the show."
Because that's when the whole conversion happened. Okay.
And then we had that mammothly long flight back.
Ah.
Just knowing that when we got there, it was all over.
That sucks, man.
I wanted to jump out of the plane.
It almost makes you wish, why couldn't you guys have just, told us to come back and then told us when we got there why,
Why didn't they just keep it going? It didn't cost that much to do, and it would have been beautiful.
Yeah,
and
ideal.
a lot of the ideas that were in Mad Jack, actually, you see later in those Pirates of the Caribbean movies. All that stuff. I was like, that was Mad Jack. He was like that guy.
Yeah.
And any writer, any good writer would have come up with that character.
Mad Jack, Jack Sparrow, what's up with,
Jury's out. Laszlo always is convinced that that's what happened. Because I actually had a story about cursed Aztec gold, too. But you know what? All that shit's in the ride anyway. Yeah. And I did actually write an outline for Disney when they were going to do Pirates as a animated feature, as a DVD.
Oh, cool.
So I turned in this outline with the zombies and the gold. But that would have happened anyway, because that's all in the ride.
Yeah.
So anyone would have written that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's still debate about what would have happened.
Yeah, man. Well, so, but that's great, though, man. You came back, and it was a major bummer to be done with Mad Jack. But at that point, was there anything on the horizon, or it was just kind of like...
No.
We were kind of at a breaking...
that was the beginning of the dark time.
What is Bill gonna do, you guys? Could this be the end of the journey? Things were just starting to get good. What's gonna happen? Tune in next week to find out. Only on the Chance Raspberry Podcast.
Cause we're gonna shoot that girl, hey. Cause we're gonna shoot that girl, hey.
Thanks for listening as always, you guys. And hey, you know the drill. Just head on over to chanceraspberry.com to get on the newsletter. Upper right-hand corner of the page says get my newsletter. Just enter your email address, hit subscribe, and you will be on the VIP list to be notified as soon as the amazingly, epically exciting conclusion of Bill Kopp Part 4 comes out. Stay tuned.
Well, the sun is up and shining.